Anna stood at the threshold of her new apartment, the key still warm in her hand. A quiet breeze rustled the trees outside, carrying with it the smell of freshly cut grass and distant barbecue. Suburbia. Quiet. Clean. Anonymous. Just what she needed. The hallway was silent except for the gentle thud of her last moving box being set down. She wiped the back of her hand across her forehead, smudging a streak of sweat. It had been a long day. Hauling furniture, negotiating with the leasing office, pretending to her mother on the phone that she was totally fine. She wasn't, not really, but that wasn't anyone's business anymore. Behind her, footsteps echoed softly. She turned, half startled. A man stood at the top of the stairs, tall, lean, dressed in a faded black t-shirt and jeans. His hair was dark, slightly tousled, as though he'd just come in from the wind. He looked at her for a moment, not quite smiling, but not unfriendly either. "You need help with that?" he asked, his voice low and even. Anna blinked. "Oh, maybe, if you don't mind." He crossed the hallway without another word and picked up one of the heavier boxes, moving with a quiet kind of strength that didn't need to show off. She followed him inside, slightly self-conscious of the clutter, the half-unpacked suitcases, the stack of unopened mail already forming on the counter. "Just here is fine," she said. He set it down and glanced around once, as if mapping the space. Then, turning back to her, he gave a small nod. "I'm Evan," he said. "Anna, I just moved in today." "I figured." Silence stretched between them. Not awkward exactly. More like a pause between two people used to solitude. "Thanks for the help," Ishim said. "Any time," he replied. Already halfway to the door, he hesitated before stepping out. "Welcome to the building." She smiled, though he wasn't looking anymore. The door closed softly behind him. That night, as she sat cross-legged on the floor, eating leftover Thai from a takeout container, Anna found herself thinking about Evan. There had been something restrained in his manner, not cold, but careful, like he knew how to vanish into silence. She didn't hear him again for 2 days. But when she passed him on the stairs the next time, she noticed the way his eyes lingered just a little longer. Not rude, not flirtatious, just aware. It was enough to keep her wondering. The day settled into a rhythm. Morning coffee, job applications, unpacking, evening walks just to get out of her own head. The apartment was quiet, almost too quiet. But Anna told herself that was part of the charm. No more arguments echoing down hallways. No more pretending to laugh when she didn't want to. Just her and a place where no one expected anything. And then there was Evan. He lived in the apartment directly across the hall. She figured that out by accident. Heard the soft snick of his door closing just as she stepped out one morning with her mug of coffee. He didn't look surprised to see her, just offered a polite nod and continued down the hall. No small talk, no neighborly questions. Just that quiet presence that always seemed to come and go like a shadow. Still, she noticed him. Sometimes he came back from work in the early evenings, his shirt slightly wrinkled, eyes shaded with exhaustion. Other times, he was already there when she returned from errands, barefoot, carrying groceries or laundry, moving like a man who kept to himself on purpose. One afternoon, a thunderstorm rolled in unexpectedly. Anna was hauling a heavy trash bag outside when the sky cracked open above her, drenching her in seconds. She stood there, blinking rain from her lashes, half laughing at how ridiculous she must look. That's when Evan appeared. He had an umbrella in his hand, big, black, clearly not his first storm, and he held it out to her without a word. "Thanks," she managed, teeth chattering. "You okay?" he asked, voice louder than usual over the rain. "Yeah, just soaked and dramatic." A flicker of amusement crossed his face. He tilted the umbrella so it covered them both. They stood awkwardly close as they walked the few steps back to the building, raindrops pattering all around them like static. In the hallway, she turned to him, water dripping from her hair. "You always save damsels in distress." "I prefer not to make a habit of it," he said, expression unreadable. She didn't press. There was something about him, something that made her hesitate to joke too much or get too familiar. Like he'd built a barrier, not out of arrogance but necessity. That night, she lay in bed, replaying the brief moment when their hands had touched as he passed her the umbrella. Just fingers brushing. Barely anything, but enough. The next week brought little changes. A shared elevator ride, a murmured "hey" in the hall. She once caught him checking his mailbox in a t-shirt and sweatpants, hair messy like he'd just woken up. He didn't seem embarrassed, just gave her a nod and continued sorting through envelopes like she wasn't standing there watching him from across the hallway. She told herself she wasn't really watching. And yet, she started noticing other things. The low hum of music through his walls, always instrumental. The warm light from under his door late at night. The faint scent of something spicy drifting into the hall when he cooked. And once, just once, she saw his expression change. It was during laundry. The building had one washer and dryer for their floor, tucked into a small room with humming machines and fluorescent lights. She was pulling damp clothes from the washer when he stepped in, a basket under his arm. "Busy night," he said. She laughed. "If I don't do it now, I'll put it off for another week." He started loading his clothes. Silence fell again, but this time it didn't feel awkward. "I burned a sock last time," she said, breaking it. He glanced over. "In the dryer. I left it in too long. It was practically crisped." That almost smile returned. She liked the way it looked on him, like it was rare enough to mean something. "Good thing you have others," he said. Then it happened. She dropped a damp shirt. It hit the floor near his feet. She bent to pick it up at the same moment he did, and for the briefest second they were close, knees nearly touching, heads bowed. Their eyes met. Not an accident, not passing, just a pause. Like both of them knew they should look away, but didn't. Then he straightened, passing her the shirt. "Here." "Thanks," she whispered. She was aware of her heartbeat the rest of the evening. Not because of the shirt, because of how he'd looked at her. Like he was thinking something he wasn't ready to say. Later, in bed, she stared at the ceiling and tried to tell herself she wasn't attracted to Evan. But she was. And she suspected, just maybe, that he was too. Anna hesitated with her finger hovering just above the intercom button. The hallway was quiet, dimly lit by the soft yellow glow of a wall sconce. From across the hall, Evan's door looked exactly the same as always. Closed, still, unassuming. She could still back out. Go back inside, Pretend she didn't have a bottle of wine chilling in the fridge and a pair of jeans that had taken her 20 minutes to choose. But she didn't want to. She wanted to know what would happen if she pressed the button. So she did. A quiet buzz echoed behind the door, followed by silence. Then the soft sound of a deadbolt sliding back. Evan opened the door wearing a black t-shirt and dark jeans, barefoot again, like he'd just gotten out of bed or hadn't left the apartment all day. His face was unreadable as always, but something flickered in his eyes when he saw her. "Hey," she said, smiling with more confidence than she felt. "I was going to open a bottle of wine and realized I don't like drinking alone. Thought I'd see if you wanted to join me." He didn't answer right away. "I mean, no pressure," she added quickly. "Totally okay if you're not up for it." He looked at her for a long second, then nodded. "Give me a minute." 10 minutes later, Evan knocked softly on her door. She had already set out 2 glasses and dimmed the lights. The apartment looked cozier than usual, warm, a little cluttered, but lived in. She motioned him inside and poured the wine. He took a small sip, standing awkwardly, until she gestured for him to sit on the couch. They sat at opposite ends, legs curled up, glasses balanced carefully in their hands. Conversation came slowly. She asked about his job. He worked in IT, managing security systems for a small firm. Not thrilling, he said, but stable. She told him about quitting her last job after the breakup, about the move, about how strange it felt to start over in a new place where no one knew anything about her. He listened more than he spoke, occasionally nodded. Sometimes she caught him watching her mouth when she talked, and every time it made her lose her train of thought. "What about you?" she asked at one point. "You always seem quiet, not in a bad way, just like you keep to yourself." He glanced down at his glass. "I'm not great at small talk." "That's okay. I'm not great at pretending things are fine when they're not." Their eyes met. A long pause. "I don't mind quiet," she added softly. He smiled just a little. "Neither do I." They finished the bottle slowly. The conversation thinned, then stopped altogether. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, just charged. Anna felt it in the air, like the static before a storm. Her knees were close to his. Her hand brushed the couch between them. He didn't move away. She wanted to lean in, but she didn't. He didn't either. Eventually, Evan stood. "Thanks for the wine," he said. "Any time," she said, voice lower than usual. He looked at her, expression unreadable again, like he was holding something back. Then, without another word, he turned and left. The next morning, she found herself staring at his door while holding her empty coffee mug. What did she expect? A goodnight kiss? A line? A confession? That wasn't his style. And yet, something had shifted. She felt it in the way he'd looked at her. Hesitant, yes, but present. There was a question lingering between them, unspoken but undeniably real. She kept thinking about the way his eyes had tracked hers, the way he'd paused before leaving, the way her whole body had felt warm, even though he'd never touched her. That night, she didn't hear a sound from across the hall. 2 days passed. Then one night, just past 11, the power went out. Anna cursed softly and padded barefoot through her dark apartment, using her phone's flashlight to navigate. She stood by the window and saw the whole block was dark, probably a transformer. The building was silent, like it had gone to sleep. She debated lighting candles. Then, almost without thinking, she stepped into the hallway. Evan's door had a faint glow behind it. He was still awake. She knocked. It took a moment, but he opened the door. A soft beam of flashlight light cut across his bare chest. He wore loose flannel pants and no shirt, and her brain took half a second too long to catch up. "Hey," she said, blinking. "Sorry, it's really dark in my place, and my phone's about to die. I was going to ask if you had a candle or a flashlight." He nodded, stepped aside without a word, and motioned for her to come in. His apartment was quiet, illuminated by a single camping lantern on the kitchen counter. The air smelled faintly of cedar and something warm, maybe incense or tea. It felt different from hers, simpler, neater, but lived in. He handed her a flashlight, and she noticed how close they were standing. "Thanks," she said, fingers brushing his. He didn't pull away. Neither did she. For a moment, neither of them moved. The air between them felt thick, electric. "You okay?" he asked, voice low. She nodded. "Just a little tired, a little wired." They stood in silence. Then he said, "Want some tea?" 15 minutes later, they sat side by side at his small kitchen table, hands cupped around mismatched mugs. The only light came from the lantern, flickering softly between them. Evan looked more relaxed in this quiet, half-lit world. He spoke more freely. Told her he'd lived here for 3 years, that he didn't have family nearby, that he liked the solitude. But sometimes it got heavy. "I get that," she said softly. "Being alone feels better than being with the wrong person. But it's still lonely." His eyes found hers in the dim light. A long pause. He reached across the table and touched her hand, gently, as though testing permission. She didn't pull away, and when she curled her fingers around his, he didn't let go. The power came back just before midnight. Anna stood in Evan's kitchen, her hand still resting lightly in his. The sudden hum of the refrigerator and the faint click of appliances reawakening felt almost jarring, like the world had remembered it existed and was reminding them too. Evan looked toward the sound, then back at her. He didn't move, neither did she. The lantern cast soft shadows across his face. In the silence, she could hear his breath, quiet, steady, slightly shallower than before. "I should go," she said softly, not moving. He nodded once, but his hand tightened around hers before he released it. She turned toward the door slowly. He followed, pausing as she stopped in the doorway. For a second, she thought he might lean in, might finally close the space between them. But he didn't. Instead, he said, "Good night, Anna." She nodded, heart thudding. "Good night." She closed the door behind her and stood in her own dark kitchen for a long time. The flashlight resting on the counter, the air still warm from summer night humidity and unresolved tension. Sleep didn't come easy. The next day passed in a strange blur. Every time Anna opened her front door, she half expected to see Evan. When she didn't, she listened for the telltale sound of his keys or footsteps in the hallway. It wasn't until late afternoon that she heard the quiet knock. She froze, mid-step, then walked slowly to the door and opened it. Evan stood there, freshly showered, hair damp, holding a small paper bag. "I made too much," he said simply, holding it out. She took it, Smells amazing. He didn't answer, just nodded slightly and turned to go. Wait, she said. He paused. You want to come in? His hesitation was barely a heartbeat long. Then he stepped through the door. Dinner wasn't really dinner. He'd brought lentil soup with herbs and a side of soft bread, still warm. She poured water with lemon into mismatched glasses and cleared a space at the counter. They ate in quiet companionship, her body acutely aware of his proximity, her senses tuned to every movement. The way he tore the bread, the quiet rhythm of his chewing, the small glances he didn't think she noticed. She leaned against the counter as she ate, and when their shoulders brushed, just barely, he didn't move away. Neither did she. After they finished, he offered to help with the dishes. She refused playfully. Next time, she said. He nodded but stayed. Minutes passed. She sat down on the couch and gestured for him to join her. He did. And there, with a soft hum of the air conditioner behind them, and nothing else in the room but shadows and unspoken questions, the space between them slowly began to disappear. She turned toward him, one leg tucked under her. He mirrored the movement, facing her. There was no music, no alcohol, no easy excuse. Only awareness. Last night, she said quietly, was that something? His eyes searched hers, unblinking. It felt like something. I thought so too. He reached out then, slowly, deliberately, as if making sure she had every chance to stop him. His fingers found her cheek, warm and gentle, and she closed her eyes briefly at the contact. When she opened them, he was closer. She didn't wait this time. Her lips met his, soft and tentative, tasting of mint and heat and held back longing. He didn't rush, didn't press, just kissed her with the same quiet intensity he carried everywhere, with patience, with care, like it meant something. She moved closer, one hand finding his shoulder, the other resting on his thigh. He responded in kind, sliding his arm around her waist, pulling her gently against him. They kissed like they were learning each other, like each second asked a question and received an answer in return. When they finally broke apart, foreheads touching, breath shallow, he whispered, I wasn't sure you wanted this. I didn't know how much until last night, she admitted. He pulled back to look at her, expression unreadable again. I don't do casual. I'm not looking for casual, she said. I'm just looking. A beat passed. Me too, he said. The night stretched slowly after that. They didn't rush. Their hands explored cautiously. Shoulders, fingers, the line of a jaw. Her shirt slipped over her head. He kissed her collarbone like it was fragile. She felt her skin light up under every touch, not because it was sexual, though it was, but because it felt intentional. Like he wanted her to feel it, to know he was really there. They didn't go all the way, not yet. But when she finally fell asleep, with her head resting on his chest, and his arm wrapped protectively around her back, she felt something deeper than satisfaction. She felt chosen. The morning sunlight crept in lazily through the blinds, drawing soft lines across Anna's bare shoulder. She stirred, still caught somewhere between sleep and memory. The warmth against her back was familiar now, steady, strong, breathing slow. Evan, He hadn't left. She opened her eyes slowly. His arm was draped over her waist, his fingers lightly curled against her stomach. His chest rose and fell in a deep, steady rhythm behind her, close enough that she felt it in the curve of her spine. Anna lay still for a moment, absorbing it. The comfort, the weight of him, the quiet. They hadn't had sex last night. Not quite. But they'd peeled away layers. Clothes, tension, hesitation. They'd kissed until their mouths were numb, until hands became braver, until her body arched instinctively toward his. There was heat. There was restraint. There was something unspoken but loud in every breath between them. It had been enough, more than enough. Carefully, she turned to face him. Evan's eyes opened just as she did, heavy with sleep but clear. "Hey," she whispered. "Hey." A beat passed. "You stayed." He blinked, then gave a small nod. "Yeah." She smiled. "You usually sneak out." "I usually don't stay long enough to decide." Her smile widened. "Glad I'm the exception." He studied her for a moment, then lifted his hand to tuck a piece of hair behind her ear. The gesture was so gentle, so intimate, she nearly forgot how to breathe. "I didn't want to leave," he said simply. They spent the next hour lazily tangled in blankets, limbs intertwining under cotton sheets, kissing between half-finished conversations. Her hands explored the plane of his chest, the dip of his collarbone, the line of his jaw. His fingers traced the edge of her hip, slow and grounding. It was different than she expected. Less hunger, more depth. She felt seen. After a while they rose and dressed slowly, like neither of them wanted to re-enter the world too quickly. She made coffee while he leaned against the counter in silence, his presence filling her apartment in a way that felt natural, not invasive. They didn't talk about what this was. Neither of them needed to, not yet. But when he kissed her before leaving, it wasn't tentative. It was full, warm, certain. The rest of the day passed in strange contrast. Normal things, emails, errands, music playing from her phone, felt tinted with something new. She caught herself smiling for no reason. Her reflection in the mirror looked softer somehow, like her body remembered his touch even when her mind tried to focus elsewhere. She didn't text him. He didn't text her, but she wasn't anxious. That night, she left her apartment door slightly ajar. He didn't come. And that was okay too. 2 days later, they ran into each other by accident in the mailroom. He was in a white button-down, unshaven, carrying a small package. She was barefoot, hair pulled up, checking her mailbox with half a banana in one hand. They both froze for a beat. "Morning," she said, chewing. He gave her that familiar quiet nod. "Hi." Then a pause. "You disappeared," she said lightly, not accusing, just curious. "I didn't want to crowd you." "You wouldn't." He shifted the box under his arm, and his eyes met hers. "It's hard for me to know what's okay. What's too much?" She stepped a little closer, smiling. "You kissed me goodnight. That's a pretty good sign." His expression warmed, noted. Before he left, he reached out and gently brushed her fingers. Just for a second, that night, he came over late. There was no wine, no conversation, not at first. Just the sound of the door closing, the shuffle of shoes off, the brief catch of breath as his hands found her waist in the dim hallway. They kissed like they had a language now, like silence didn't mean distance. His hands were less hesitant, hers more certain. Clothes fell away naturally. Skin touched skin without apology. This time there was no pause. He undressed her slowly, carefully, reverently, like each inch of her skin had meaning. She pulled him to the couch, impatient and bold, and he followed without a word. It wasn't rushed, but it wasn't slow either. It was deliberate, weighted, bodies folding together, breaths sinking, hips moving in rhythm born of instinct and something deeper. She moaned his name, soft and surprised. He didn't speak much, but when he did, it was close to her ear. A murmur of want, a single curse when she pulled him closer. A whispered, "Don't stop," when her fingers pressed into his back. When it was over, they lay together in a mess of limbs and quiet gasps, the room lit only by the street lamp outside the window. He rested a hand on her stomach. She laced her fingers through his. Neither of them moved for a long time. Then, finally, "I've been thinking about this," he said. She turned her head to look at him. "Me too." The days that followed had a different rhythm. Not faster, not louder, just steadier. Evan didn't move in, not in the literal sense, but his presence lingered now, even when he wasn't in her apartment. Sometimes she'd find one of his mugs in her sink, or a sweatshirt draped over the back of her chair. Once he left a handwritten note on her fridge that simply read, "Don't forget to eat something real today." Anna wasn't used to anyone noticing those things. She wasn't used to letting someone in. But with Evan, it felt easy, almost too easy. They didn't talk much about what they were. They didn't set rules or labels. And yet every time he knocked softly on her door, every time she felt his hand on her back, as they moved through her kitchen in shared silence, it felt like a promise, not forever, but something real. One Friday night, Sophie called. "Still alive over there?" her friend teased. "Or did the suburbs swallow you whole?" Anna laughed. "Still breathing. Just a little quieter." There was a pause on the other end. "You sound different." "Do I?" "Like you're hiding something. Or someone." Anna leaned against the window, watching the dusky orange spill across the neighborhood roofs. She thought of Evan asleep in her bed just that morning, his body curved instinctively toward hers. "I'm not hiding him," she said finally. Her friend caught it instantly. "Him?" "It's complicated," Anna said, "but good. Really good." Sophie laughed. "You sound like you're falling." Anna smiled. "Maybe I am." That night, Evan didn't come over. No knock. No quiet shuffle in the hallway. She waited longer than usual, telling herself she wasn't waiting. At midnight, there was still nothing. She tried not to worry, but when the clock passed 2 a.m. and her phone still hadn't buzzed, she curled up on the couch, restless, alone again. She was just drifting off when a soft knock finally echoed against her door. Heart racing, she opened it. Evan stood there in jeans and a dark hoodie, hair wind-mussed, something unreadable in his expression. "Hi," she said, stepping back to let him in. He didn't move. "I almost didn't come," he said. voice low. Why? He glanced down at the floor, then up again. Because I didn't want to mess this up. I've never been good at whatever this is becoming. Anna stayed quiet, giving him space. I like the quiet, he continued. I like being alone. But I like you more. Something in her chest unfolded, slow and wide. Then come in, she said. He stepped forward, and she closed the door behind him. They didn't touch each other right away. Instead, they stood in the dark kitchen, just breathing. She watched his hands, how they flexed slightly. Nervous, uncertain. She reached for one, lacing their fingers together. That was all it took. He pulled her to him, kissed her, like he'd been holding it back all day. Their mouths met fast, hot, eager. No hesitation this time. No teasing. Just need, surging like a wave finally cresting. Clothes came off quickly, carelessly. They didn't make it to the bedroom. He lifted her onto the counter, her legs wrapping around him as his hands found her hips. The room smelled like sweat and citrus and late summer air. She gasped his name as he entered her, smooth, deep, filling her in a way that made everything else drop away. His grip was strong, but not rough. His eyes stayed on hers the entire time. This wasn't shy. This wasn't slow. This was surrender. And it was mutual. After they lay together on the floor, half laughing, half breathless. Evan's head rested against her chest, one arm wrapped tightly around her middle. Neither of them spoke for a long while. Then, "I've never done this before," he murmured. What, had sex on a kitchen floor? A quiet laugh. No, stayed. Wanted to stay. She kissed the top of his head. Then stay, she said. The next morning, he was gone before sunrise. But when she padded into the kitchen, bleary-eyed and still naked, she found a note written in the steam on her fridge's metal door. See you tonight. That night, he came back. And the next night, and the one after that. They never labeled it. They didn't need to. He was the quiet next door. And now, he was hers.